My name is Hunter Elmore. I'm a design consultant here with Gravity Sketch. And I think it would be helpful to share a little bit about my background before we get into it, just to talk about where Gravity Sketch has been useful in my career, and then also how I, as a design consultant, work with our clients. So I studied industrial design and transportation design at the University of Cincinnati. My first design job, I was working with Nerf and blasters back in 2019, I think, with Fortnite collaborations, which was a lot of fun. But I did a complete 180 from toy design into medical devices and surgical robotics at Johnson and Johnson. Spent a bit of time there, then went to consumer tech and nautical and various consultancies with a lot of different focuses, getting even more varied. And then went to Ford and was doing automotive design, mostly on exteriors, but also a bit in interior stuff. And from all of that, I learned a lot of different tools. Those different industries all kind of have their own niche constraints that they put on themselves with the tools that they use. So I was doing production work in Alias and SolidWorks and CATIA, Rhino, Blender, pretty much you name it. And it was a tool that I had learned. And I started using Gravity Sketch, gosh, back in probably 2017 now at University of Cincinnati. And the great thing about Gravity Sketch and where it was immediately valuable to my workflows, despite being in all those different industries, was that it served as a place to bring back content and to contextualize and ideate in a collaborative and a really cohesive way to give me more confidence and conviction in the designs that I was creating. So I would use Gravity Sketch in each of those industries and found that with all those different tools, it worked really well. So I've been using it for, I guess that puts it around 8 years now. And now, as a design consultant with Gravity Sketch, I work with a lot of our clients to help them unlock workflow potential and different capabilities of the tool. So everything that we're going to be talking through here today, while this is kind of a theoretical project, the value prop and the ROI that we're seeing is directly linked to real world applications that our clients are already seeing. So it's all very authentic, very real in terms of what we're actually creating with the tool and where our users are finding value. So obviously we can kind of go ahead and dive into this project that we've got here. And this is working on redesigning the cockpit of a hay lift vehicle. So this project is going to highlight a few of the key aspects of the design process, how Gravity Sketch really affects those, and is starting to revolutionize a lot of that in the industry. And that's around functionality and product performance, ergonomics and user needs, aesthetic appeal and brand identity, as well as just sustainability and scalable manufacturability. Things like bringing in different stakeholders in the design process earlier on, really identifying those problems sooner, and that's going to lead to better products and better products faster. So one of the big key portions of this is just the contextualization. Obviously, you can see me floating around here in app, and like MC mentioned, Gravity Sketch is an ecosystem. I'm in the VR headset right now, just for the sake of hardware clarity. I'm on a Quest 3 headset. I'm not tethered, this is just charging, but I'm actually able to be in here and very quickly and easily kind of ideate and make things in 3D. So this is a very nice and easy, intuitive way to start creating in 3D. Everyone from students to experienced designers at all levels are able to jump in here and create something and have that kind of go to that next level of communication and collaboration and creation. So with this product, we're going to look at those different capabilities. And right now we've kind of got this imported context. We've got this hay lift tractor that's more of a legacy product is what we may call it in industry, or something that we've already created that's on market. And we've imported that from other tools. So Gravity Sketch can handle these 3D objects, whether it's FBX, OBJ, IGIS. We have a lot of different file types that we can handle in terms of 3D data. We're able to import those in here and contextualize our environment. So rather than just sketching randomly on a piece of paper or something 2D, suddenly I have context of real life scale, of real life interaction points. And I can take that one step further with some of our built-in aspects like these characters that we've got here. And I can interact with all of this either at scale, or right now I'm actually at around 25% scale to make it easier to move around the room. But even these mannequins come in at 50th percentile and are all posable. So they allow you to get to that next level of interaction and fidelity and contextualization, so that everything you do kind of from square one in your design process has that contextualization that usually leads to aha moments later on in the design process. So anyone who's been through the design process, as I'm sure a lot of the people on this call have many times, when you're creating something in 2D, there's a lot of interplay where things get more difficult to understand. There's a lot of back and forth and communication where things can fall through the cracks, or even if you have a designer who's extremely well versed in 3D and in 2D, that transition between the two is a bit counterintuitive. You're taking this 3D idea in your head, you're converting that to a 2D platform to communicate it, and then you're trying to recapture all of that magic and all of that reality into a 3D object. The beauty of Gravity Sketch is that you can contextualize your design process immediately so that even from that first thumbnail sketch, it's got form, it's got value, it's got something that's three-dimensional, and that communicates at all sorts of different levels. So that gets us to kind of our first point, which is design with conviction. And if I'm in here in app, let's imagine if I were to go down to 100% scale. First and foremost, if I get myself to 100% scale here, I can actually get up and walk around the object at full scale. So in this case, where it's an obviously fairly large object, this saves a lot of time and a lot of capabilities in terms of just interacting with it and understanding what the presence of these products are. And while these big products and large vehicles and boats and all sorts of very large things that are very expensive to mock up provide great value for Gravity Sketch, we've seen this value all the way from much larger vehicles than this, all the way down to very small components, because you're even able to scale in to a very, very small size, like 1,000% and even more. I can see that I have a pretty massive line of sight issue with this beam that's cutting across the center of it. So these findings are things that you can only really understand by getting into the environment, into interacting with the object at scale, and seeing where those issues are going to come from. So if I'm looking at this and I say, okay, I'm going to need that to change, I'm going to need this to change, maybe even the screen and the interaction points are in some of the wrong locations because they're outside of my cone of vision of where the heavy equipment is actually moving. Maybe I want to take that and move it up to the side here. Maybe I want to address that in a different spot. So if I zoom out and kind of see what I've just done, suddenly I already have a number of design findings that can start to influence and impact the entire development process. And they've done that so much earlier on in the design process than that aha moment typically happens. So in this case, because I'm focused on this interior, just to make it a bit easier to see, I've pulled that to the back here. And obviously we've got those findings that we were just talking about with line of sight issues, ergonomics, and where we actually want to reach out and interact with the object. And what we can start to do is sketch over top of this. Because Gravity Sketch is not just an evaluation tool, but also an ideation and really a holistic intent finding tool, this is where a lot of the value for our clients comes in at. So if I come in here and I start to sketch and draw, I can do that very quickly, right? We have the ability of the contextualization of 3D tools that traditionally are pretty constrictive, right? They keep you in a mindset of just executing. Whereas the beauty of Gravity Sketch is you get all of that beneficial context, but in an environment where you can evaluate and ideate and create things very quickly. So for now, let's go ahead.
Oh, actually, Hunter,
Yeah, go ahead.
because my new mistake. I didn't get to follow you right when you're the first steps when you went into the seat. Do you mind if you just go back into the seat? I
Yeah,
kind of followed you when you showed a little bit, but just love to see. Yeah, exactly. Perfect to demo that first few steps you shared of just being able to sit in VR, look up. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
yeah.
And folks on the line, feel free to put in the chat if you'd like to have Hunter show something specific, or for me to stop following Hunter if you want to see a broad view. Like, don't hesitate to let us know in the chat. And Hunter, I'll let you know what folks say.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So really the idea here is that right now I've scaled myself up to 100%. I'm in the environment that the actual user would be in. And now, whether it's just starting off that design process, or even if, like, let's pretend that this whole object is something that our team has developed over whatever period of time, I can evaluate that at scale. And I can understand that workflow process and identify where those issues are going to be without going through those steps that are usually really costly, right? So I know in automotive, whenever we're cutting physical properties, cutting clay, things like that, it gets very expensive to mock up anything even close to this. And having that ability to hop in here with the digital model that we've already created, or even if we've created it here in Gravity Sketch, it's that much easier. So right now, like the main points with this lift down, I can see pretty clearly that my rear view mirror on the right side is not in a great spot. I can't really use that at all while the lift is down. This massive kind of pillar or beam that's cutting across here is going to already influence some of that visibility and create some blind spots for me. Not to mention, just the space in this cabin is pretty tight, right? Like climbing in here would be quite difficult. And if I turn around, there's a lot of empty space behind the seat as well. So, not really the best usage of space. And I'm able to come in here and look at that at scale. Even things like screens and where all this is placed. I can tell very intuitively when I'm operating this equipment, this is kind of the area that I want to look at. It's all of this stuff where that lift is actually going to be moving. Whereas this screen being down here is kind of out of the way. It's not really conducive to a good experience for me operating the vehicle. So, really quick, just rough evaluation of the workflow and of the process is extremely valuable because this can happen at every single stage. And while I am right now the only person in VR in here, MC's on Screen Collab. She's pinned to my headset so she can see exactly what I'm seeing. So, even if she gets motion sick or if she doesn't have her own headset or she's in leadership and she needs a more accessible way to just drop into a room and see what's happening, she can access that both synchronously while I'm here in app and asynchronously. And typically there's microphones in the headsets, there's obviously microphones on your computer, so you can communicate without another kind of meeting tool, which is great. And I think we just had Paul jump in here as well, and that's great because he's also in the VR headset. So he can come in here and start to look at these design features and understand at an early stage what we're talking about. So we're both in here, we're both at independent scales, but Paul's in London, right? And I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio. So that telepresence aspect of it and collaboration with your team is a huge value point. It makes it that much easier to work with your team and understand what's going on, whether it's while they're in headset working on it, or even if you just want to pop in asynchronously and look at it here on Screen Collab. Now, as far as yeah, go ahead, MC.
Oh, I just wanted to say that thank you, Paul, for joining us. Paul is our engineering manager at Gravity Sketch, and this is just a fun way we want to share that how we as a company love to collaborate both in 3D and me and Screen Collab on as Hunter said on my Mac. So yeah, this is super exciting. And we actually got a question from the group. Peter had asked about. I know you're setting the scale to 100% when you were in that driver's seat, but how do you correspond it to eye point and evaluating lines of sight? So maybe that's a question for you to answer quickly, Hunter. And I know that we're at 10 minutes at time, so we're going to speed along too for the communication piece. I'll let you take the question first, though.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of that, I mean, it's all amplified by having any sort of physical buck. So in the automotive industry, this works really well. You can actually lock the room to various points. So right now, if I were to scale this at 100%, my headset knows where my floor is because I set that with my Guardian setup. So I see the shadow of the real world and I can lock that room to the ground. So if I were to scale to 100%, I know that now this is at an accurate height to the ground. And what we can do is we can use tools like measurement. So if we know that this distance from the cabin floor to the real world ground is 89 centimeters or whatever it might be, then we can start to use that to create some sort of just physical buck. Or even at these really early stages, you can eyeball it and it will still be significantly more effective than if you hadn't had it. But we've seen a lot of great kind of cohesive workflows with the teams, particularly in automotive as they're working on interiors, because having any sort of representative buck with those H points and with those line of sights makes it that much more immersive. Which gets into another aspect of the tool, which is AR pass through that we support on some headsets. The MetaQuest 3 has great pass through. Like for instance, you guys can't see what I'm looking at, but I can see my whole computer screen over here in the corner. So I can see that MC is following my screen and I can see the chat, all while I'm looking at this digital object overlaid on top of it. So there's a lot of kind of nuanced factors that go into more detailed workflows, but especially when you're already prepping for that 3D model to eventually come, having a very rough interior buck is extremely helpful for that. You can see here, Paul's kind of running around, leaving notes and talking about different aspects of it. So this is a real good example of how we usually collaborate. with different users. And that communication is so critical. I think everybody that's in any sort of industry that has to design and take something to production understands, the design team is just one part of a larger system. And communicating with engineers and with design for manufacturing and marketing and all those different internal or even external stakeholders that have a say in the process moving forward, it can be pretty difficult, right? Because not everyone is trained to understand a 2D sketch. Not everyone is trained to understand perspective. So if we're going through and we're just importing some, information to give context, whether it's kind of an illustration board or going through and actually sketching out all of these lines and then putting ourselves in that situation, we can have a much more immersive communication experience. And Paul, right now, he's from our engineering team. He could be a designer or an engineer or anyone from the company that we're working with that wants to come in and just understand what's going on. Maybe I had a question and I said, hey, Paul, we've got this beam that runs around the top on our legacy model. It's really thick. Is there any way that we could shrink that up? Is it in that exact position for a concrete reason? Could we potentially make it thinner? And then suddenly we're talking about material properties and safety and compliancy. And that conversation usually waits until much later in the process. So the fact that we're able to do that right away and we're able to communicate all of that and not just do it in like an evaluation tool, but also in a tool where we can make things in real time, right? If we decide, hey, this screen would look way better over here, or this screen makes more sense there, so it's still in line of sight. Maybe this is an actual movable piece that as you lift the hay bale, maybe it comes up with the hay bale to protect you from whatever angle that might be at when it drops. It starts to really influence our design process in a way that makes it collaborative, immersive, and just much better thought through process, in all honesty, than when we're not using a tool. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hunter. Really appreciate, um, yeah, your final points around the clear decision making, the alignment on design, how we got to see here in VR as well as screen app when I'm following you too. Uh, the understanding of the product and the visual environment before we get to that scene of having to go to manufacturing, which is really key. Um, in the last 5 minutes, I want to give some time for Q&A, but maybe since I'm in screen app very quickly, we can highlight a couple of high-level features in Screen Collab. So if someone doesn't have a VR headset, how they can, collaborate and interact. So Hunter, feel free to let me know, but I was going to actually demo out here our fun laser pointer. It's kind of cool if I want to be very specific here with Hunter, I can kind of point to very specific things. Um, oops, excuse me. Also, we have the function of the comments. So I left a few comments in here. They're left for Hunter to reply to. So you can feel free to leave both red lines, as you saw earlier with Paul when he was leaving things like "This is great," to literal comments that then the team can address, so that you can collaborate asynchronously as well. Any other shout outs that I missed before to go to Q&A? Paul and Hunter, if you want to highlight on Screen Collab before, we jump on over to the last few minutes.
Yeah, I think one more thing on Screen Collab is just the value of that presentation, right? We've been showing everything from a very organic collaboration standpoint, which is where it's at in the majority of the design development process. But Screen Collab is a great way to showcase all of this value to leadership, to management, to external stakeholders if they don't have a headset or they don't want to get in VR, or even just because it's more accessible. You can pull it up even on your web browser now with Stream Collab. You don't even have to download anything. You can hop in the room and see everything. So all of these insights and learnings that we've got are that much easier to present in 3D rather than 2D. So it's just another really powerful aspect of the tool.
Amazing. And Hunter and Paul, is there anything is there anything left over that you want to share before I kind of hop into questions and wrapping up this demo?
I think from a quick evaluation standpoint of what the tool does, this is where a lot of our value comes from. Obviously, like we said at the beginning, it's a very deep tool. There's a lot of different industries that are using it, from footwear, automotive, apparel, even entertainment and animation, architecture. There's clients in pretty much every design industry. And we've got a lot of examples of their work in our community creations on Landing Pad and in user studies and showcases that are on our YouTube channel. So if you're curious about any of that, that's one way to learn a little bit more.
Nice. Thanks,
I think
Hunter. And
the only
Paul, yeah.
other thing I'd add is that like you guys can see we're here in the room together, so we can be interacting live here. But this also works when we're in the room separately as well. Hunter could put this design together and then invite me to join the room later on when I have some time. I can go around, leave comments, add some markups, and then Hunter can come back and respond to those comments. So it works just as well asynchronously as if we're in the room together.
Thank you, Paul. And it was super fun that you could just join us in the middle of this demo. Super fun. All right, folks. Checking out at the time, I noticed that we don't have any other new questions. Feel free to put them in the chat. And if we don't answer them today, we'll definitely get back to you. So don't hesitate. To kind of wrap up, this demo, thank you all again for your time. As you saw here with Hunter and Paul, myself, we really believe in enabling intuitive 3D design at scale. We want to make sure that teams can communicate and collaborate. And with this workflow, it ultimately leads to better products.